Claire had always felt that her life followed a predictable path, one devoid of surprises. She woke up early, brewed coffee, hurriedly fixed her hair, and dressed simply, paying little attention to her appearance. As a literature teacher at a public school, she was well respected but never stood out. However, the things she taught her students seemed to echo only within the classroom walls, never beyond them. Her voice, though full of knowledge and experience, never seemed to reach anyone outside of that context. At work, Claire felt like a background figure, a familiar face but irrelevant. Her husband, Andrew, though a good man, never noticed her growing frustration. He was too focused on his own career, and after years of living together, he no longer saw Claire as a woman, but just as someone sharing a roof with him. Their conversations were shallow, and their desire had long faded. Claire felt invisible, as if she were living alongside a stranger. Her routine was boring, an endless cycle of the same gestures, the same words. Her weekends were spent in silence next to Andrew, with no effort to rekindle the passion that once existed between them. When Claire looked at herself in the mirror, she rarely liked what she saw, a woman aged by neglect, with no spark, no self-love. She no longer knew when the last time she felt desired was. It was against this backdrop of disillusionment that Phil entered Claire's life. Phil was young, with vibrant eyes and contagious energy. He had started working as a history teacher at the school where Claire taught. From the very first day, he stood out. Everyone at school loved him, his students, colleagues, even the administration. He had something Claire had always longed for, the ability to be seen, noticed, and respected not only for his competence but also for his presence. Phil and Claire first met during a faculty meeting. He approached her with a warm smile, extending his hand. "Hi, Claire. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard a lot of good things about you." These simple but sincere words made Claire feel just a little more visible. When he looked her in the eye, something inside her ignited. It wasn't desire, but rather a rare feeling of being noticed by someone. Over time, they began to talk more. At first, it was only about work, the challenges of dealing with students, teaching methods. Phil was curious about how Claire handled classroom difficulties, and she felt comfortable helping him. But soon, their conversations expanded to other topics. He showed interest in her personal life, her opinions on books and philosophy, her life experiences. Claire, who had grown so used to being overlooked, began to open up. She talked about her marriage to Andrew, how she felt that things had grown cold between them. She spoke about her childhood, her fears, her dreams that never came true. Phil listened attentively, and she could tell he genuinely cared. He wasn't just asking questions, he was really interested. And that touched Claire deeply. Their meetings became more frequent. Phil always found a way to be near Claire, whether after class, during breaks, or at planning meetings. He sought her out naturally, without forcing anything, but with a frequency that made Claire start to look forward to their conversations. Phil always had a smile, a joke, a kind word. For Claire, he was becoming impossible to ignore. One afternoon, after a faculty meeting, Phil invited her to grab a coffee. Claire hesitated for a moment. She knew what this could lead to, but at the same time, the idea of spending time with someone who truly saw her made her decision almost immediate. "Sure," she replied, smiling back. The coffee was the beginning of everything. They sat at a small cafe near the school, and, as always, Phil was charming. His words, his gestures, his gaze, everything about him seemed focused on Claire. He made her laugh with his stories about students, but he also asked deep questions about her life. He wanted to know what Claire truly wanted, what made her happy, how she felt. Over the weeks, their meetings became more frequent. Each coffee, each conversation, made Claire feel more involved. She felt appreciated, desired, and this feeling was new to her. The emptiness that had always accompanied her seemed to diminish whenever Phil was around. He made her feel important, as though she had something valuable to offer, as though she were more than just the teacher who taught classes and went home alone. On one of these outings, Phil took her to a park. The sky was clear, the wind was gentle, and their conversation became more intimate. He spoke about his experiences, his passions, and Claire began to realize that he wasn't just charismatic, but also deeply sincere. The moment he touched her for the first time, gently placing his hand on hers, Claire felt something overwhelming. She knew what was about to happen was wrong, that she was betraying Andrew's trust, but at that moment, she felt like she was living something she could never have again. She was alive, feeling something she hadn't felt in so long. The first night Claire spent with Phil was an explosion of repressed desire, a total surrender to what she felt. When he kissed her for the first time, it was as if the world around her disappeared. They met in a discreet hotel, a place where no one would recognize them. At first, Claire hesitated, but soon she gave herself over to the passion. The feeling of being desired, of being important to someone, took over her completely. But as their meetings became more frequent, the guilt also grew. Claire knew she was destroying her marriage. She knew she was betraying someone who, although he had neglected her, didn't deserve this. She tried to deny what was happening, but with every touch from Phil, she felt more consumed by desire. Their relationship grew stronger, but the emptiness inside Claire didn't disappear. She began to question whether she really loved Phil or if she was just seeking an escape. She felt guilty, but at the same time, didn't know how to stop. What she did know was that her life was changing, and she would never be the same woman who, years ago, had agreed to live a life without emotion next to Andrew. The end of Claire and Phil's story was inevitably unfolding. The tension was rising, the guilt intensifying, and somewhere deep in her heart, Claire knew she couldn't keep living like this.